Don't Say Gay. The controversial bill that was passed in Florida got a lot of coverage on the news media, and you probably saw it being talked about, especially by the mainstream left-leaning media, as a bill that prohibits essentially talking about LGBTQ in schools, full stop, that's it. However, anybody who actually did any actual research and maybe even read the bill saw that that wasn't the case. In this clip, Amala Ekpunobi, if you don't know about her, check her out. She's with PragerU, debates a student who asks a question about the Don't Say Gay bill and does a really good job of essentially breaking down why the media was misleading about this bill in the first place. Check it out.
I don't understand that.
Like
that's
teachers
written in the bill.
Well, it wasn't written in the bill, but that's why I'm saying that I feel like it's bills like those are being targeted towards gay people and lesbians. Well,
I would argue that the bills also say that you should not show children heterosexual acts.
Nice
Hello.
intro.
So this kind of goes back to the first question.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of confused and like would be interested in your answer about what the difference is between conservatism and like the current Republican Party. Because like something that really drives me away from the Republican Party is a lot of the like blatant lies and bigotry that I hear coming out of that, and kind of the lack of calling that out from other people as well. So I guess, and like listening to what you're talking about today,
This guy
it seems
watches
like you're very
CNN.
focused on the facts, and that's something that's driving a lot of what you're like thinking and saying. But that doesn't seem to really be coming from the Republican Party. So
Okay.
I'm confused on how you're.
I'm curious. I would like. Can I get examples of what you mean when you say like they're focused on bigotry or like saying certain things?
So like blatant lies, I guess, would kind of be with the election and like election deniers, and then the lack of people who are calling that out. So I guess, I mean, a good example would be, I mean, you were talking about, following the facts and the science with regards to like transgender youth. So I'm just kind of confused on how then you're saying we should follow the facts in respects to that, but then all the kind of Republicans who are ignoring that. And then I guess with the bigotry would be in regards to like the Don't Say Gay law in Florida, and then the lack of like Republicans who are then calling that out.
Yeah. So I'll touch on the Don't Say Gay thing first. Then we'll get to the election.
So first off, you can already tell this guy consumes mainstream media, full stop, doesn't do any actual research into these issues. And look, you can't expect every citizen to spend as much time as you and I and someone like Amala puts into researching these issues. So to an extent, you can't really blame him. But if you're going to be someone who stands up and fights for a cause, it is something you need to be educated in. So, for example, if you're going to come to a public forum and debate issues, or you're so concerned about particular issues that you show up in a public forum, I would hope that you take it upon yourself to actually thoroughly research these things. It looks to me like this young man probably just consumes CNN and MSNBC, the New York Times, etc., and hasn't done any actual research looking at independent journalism or going to the source material, for example, when it comes to the quote, Don't Say Gay bill.
Election thing. Then we'll get to the Republican thing. The Don't Say Gay bill, I think, is falsely labeled the Don't Say Gay bill. I've actually gone to the page, read the bill itself. It's actually called the Parental Rights and Education Bill. And if you go through and read the bill itself, a lot of people engaged in all this fanfare and getting angry about a label, which is 3 words that they heard, rather than going and actually reading the bill. And the bill itself talks about just staying away from sexual education that has to do with other sexualities, has to do with gender theory. A lot of people got mad at the bill saying that he was trying to erase African American history. But if you go in and read it, there's actually a full paragraph where he says the school must dedicate time to talking about African American history, including slavery and Jim Crow and all these different things.
Yet what you have is people on the left saying essentially, if you don't want CRT in schools, then you don't want to teach history. Here you have a bill by a Republican governor that explicitly designates a section of the bill to saying you must teach that history. But of course, the mainstream media isn't going to tell you that. They're just going to say it's the Don't Say Gay bill and they hate LGBT people, they hate black people, etc. Meanwhile, based on the logic used to label it the Don't Say Gay bill, we could just as easily call it the Don't Say Straight bill, because all it says is don't teach K through 3 kids about sex, period.
Written directly in it. There's nothing in the bill that explicitly says you should not say the word gay or encourages teachers to not talk about the fact that you can have a family that has 2 dads or 2 moms. So I think that was a lot of just media propaganda. And
Florida's controversial Don't Say Gay law takes effect today. Don't Say Gay bill.
The Don't Say Gay. Don't Say Gay.
The Don't Say Gay bill.
Don't Say Gay law.
Don't Say Gay bill. Don't Say Gay bill. Don't Say Gay bill.
And switching things around that
How many of those people that it just showed do you think actually read the bill? I'm going to go with approximately 0.0.
got people angry.
Okay, can I just, are you going to switch topics? Could I follow on that?
You can respond, yeah.
Okay, so then my question, I guess, following up on that would be, would you be against then like a kindergartner being like read a story that has like 2 dads or 2 moms?
I mean, that doesn't necessarily make me upset. I wouldn't go running to the school board about it. I would question the need for having any sort of conversation that talks about relationships in school. But if you're just showing a picture book and it has 2 dads in it, okay, whatever. I'm not upset about it. I think what specifically conservative parents are really
And by the way, the bill doesn't exclude something like that from taking place.
upset about is things much more nefarious than showing 2 dads in a book. I mean, talking about homoeroticism and pornography and different ways to engage in sexual acts, gender confusion. That's what's really brought parents to the forefront of this discussion. It's not something as simple and as harmless as showing 2 dads in a book.
Okay, but like, do you understand that like that is in Florida? Like that is what's not allowed to happen though?
No, I don't understand that. That's,
Like-
Because that's not the case.
that's
teachers-
what's written in the bill.
Well, it wasn't written in the bill, but that's why I'm saying that I feel like it's bills like those are being targeted towards gay people.
You notice he said, I feel like. That's an immediate red flag for me. Anytime I'm having an exchange with someone and they preface everything they say with, I feel like. I don't care how you feel, man. What's the evidence? What are the facts? She's being very logical and factual in her explanation. That's why when he said, you do realize that that's what's happening in Florida, right? She said, no, I don't realize that because I've actually read the legislation and that's not what's happening in Florida.
And lesbians will.
I would argue that the bills also say that you should not show children heterosexual acts. So it's not targeting of any
Exactly.
kind to any sort of sexuality. I wouldn't want to send my kindergarten to school and have them talk about a man and a woman having sex. I think the bill explicitly lays out what conversations are appropriate for school and what conversations are not. And sexual conversations, conversations about sexuality.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. She keeps referring to the bill and what it actually says. Meanwhile, he's never read the bill, I guarantee you, and he keeps speaking from a place of emotion and from a place of essentially dogma that he's been fed by a media that has political leanings and political goals and essentially is undergirded by a theme of activism. So here, classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3, K through 3, or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students. Pretty straightforward, all right? In sexual orientation includes straight. A lot of times people forget that. It includes straight. I put a tweet out a while back that said, I don't want my kindergartner's teacher teaching her about gay sex, and I don't want my kindergartner's teacher teaching her about straight sex. It's not the orientation that's the concern. It's the sex, period. This is K through 3, people.
Identification are just not what we send children to school for.
But would you be against then like a fifth grader just reading?
So he immediately pivots. You notice the parental rights and education bill is about K through 3. She disproves him pretty handedly, and then he immediately pivots to, well, a 5th grader. Well, that's not what's in the bill.
Reading a book where there's a relationship between like a man and a man or a woman and a woman, where like their sexuality is discussed.
I mean, not
Okay.
necessarily, but I don't know why that book has to be given to that child from the school. I think there are very few things that a school should be taking care of, and that is math, reading, writing, science, and maybe some home economics.
It's very telling that one particular side wants to keep pushing the envelope on when we can teach little kids about sex and sexual orientation and gender identity. That is not what school is for. And you're kind of showing all your cards there when you just keep pressing. Well, when is it okay to talk to them about this? When can we talk to them about this? Why do you care so much about talking to them about that? I had to take a quote abstinence class in high school, and it was a big deal. They had to get permission. We learned about sexual intercourse and ways to abstain from sex and how to protect yourself and avoid diseases and pregnancy. That was in high school, like later on in high school when I had that class. Why are they pushing this stuff on little kids, man?
But as far as engaging in conversations about any sort of relationship or sexuality, it feels wholly unnecessary to me. And I don't know where the school train ran away from us that they now feel that they are the arbiters of teaching children anything that has to do with relationships. I think those are conversations for mom and dad, or mom and mom.
But what about the relationships between like men and women? In the sense that, like, there are plenty of books where a man and a woman are together.
Sure, yeah. If you want like we go on a date and go get lunch together or something like that, sure. But again, that's not what parents are coming to the school for.
But I would disagree, and I would say I think there are plenty of people who are upset. That is being taught, and that is what's happening.
You could.
Again, he's just speaking from a place of no real evidence. He's just saying, I bet that there's people who feel a certain way. Of course, in any sufficiently large population, you can find people that feel any particular way. That's what's beautiful about America. But what we're saying here is you can have your opinions, you can have your beliefs, you can have your particular ideologies and political leanings. But in the school, we're not teaching any of that stuff. We're teaching the fundamental basics of education that you need to be a successful, self-sufficient human. That is totally different. Why are teachers insisting on being activists these days?
You could say that, and you'd probably find a few Christian people who go.
Well, I think it's more than a few if we're going to be realistic in Florida.
No evidence.
Well, I'm not a religious person. I'm sure there's plenty of Christian people who say I'm against that in school, but I think it is about being forthright with what we have with our kids. Like when I went to school and we were going to get any sort of sexual education, I was sent home with a piece of paper a week before, a day before, that said, hey, we're going to have a conversation about sexual activity and relationships with your child. Here's what we're going to discuss. If you'd like to opt out, check this box here. We'll send your kid to another room and they can have a pizza party. I don't know why that it's such a difficult thing to do in the modern age, and why teachers feel the need to inject these conversations into classrooms without parents knowing. I think a great way to mitigate this problem as a whole is to engage in curriculum transparency, where at the beginning of every year, when you send your child to school, you get a little book that says, here's what we're teaching. Here are the resources your kid is going to look at. You can look at these resources yourself. If you have a problem with any of the resources we are going to give your child, notify us. And it's a very simple issue to just put the power back in the hands of parents where it should have been from the beginning. And it feels weird to meet such resistance on allowing parents to be able to make that choice for their kids. Not necessarily resistance from you, but from left-leaning people at large.
Okay, thank you. And then I mean, don't necessarily agree with that, but I guess just to go to the second.
I don't necessarily agree with that. What do you not necessarily agree with, man? Parents having the right to know what their children are being taught in schools, which, by the way, are funded by their tax dollars? Crazy.
Yeah. What was the second thing again? Republicans?
Republicans, conservatisms, and then also about, I mean, just following the facts with regards to like science regarding like puberty blockers, and then ignoring the science and the facts with regard to the election.
Yeah. So what is interesting is that when I say follow the science when it comes to puberty blockers and transgenderism, the question becomes what science? Because in the United States of America, science seems to be controlled by this totalitarian force of left-leaning people who are willing to silence anybody who disagrees in the scientific realm. There's a brilliant neuroscientist by the name of Deborah So who wrote a book called The End of Gender. And she was super scared to write this because she knew it meant being alienated from all of her scientific community. So when you have a force working like that against you in this country, and I'm looking to outside research from other countries to substantiate what we know to be true, but for some reason can't get unbiased research, I think that's why a lot of Republicans feel the way they do about elections. Now, whether they're right or wrong, I don't know. I haven't looked into any of the auditing they've done of the elections, and I don't necessarily concern myself with that conversation. But that idea is a sown seed of mistrust. They have mistrust in the institutions and systems as they stand. And whether or not you feel a certain way about the elections, that mistrust is rightful. I mean, we're finding out now that the FBI, which is a government agency, is now in contact with big tech like Facebook and Twitter, actively auditing and censoring information prior to election cycles happening. And this is noted. We have the emails from the FBI, the Twitter files have come out.
And that should concern you no matter which side of the political aisle you're on. The fact that a government agency can influence a social media network to take things down leading up to an election that might sway the voters one way or the other is a direct violation of the First Amendment. We have a freedom of speech. Yes, these big tech companies are private companies, and if they want to take stuff down by their own volition, they can do that. I am against that in principle, but the First Amendment doesn't protect our right of freedom of speech on social media platforms in general. But when you start to say the FBI is telling them to take it down, now the government is telling you what you can and can't say, and that is a direct violation of our First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. People on the left and people on the right should both be concerned about this, but really, it's only people on the right who are concerned about this, and that in and of itself is very telling.
So whether or not they're right about the election is really not necessarily the problem. The problem is you have a large portion of Americans who have little to no faith in the systems that they've always had faith in for the most part.
That's right.
And I
That's
think
right.
that's what we should be addressing.
Okay, but okay, sorry.
So there you have it, guys. I think Amala did a fantastic job in breaking these topics down and countering his points, if you want to call them points. But really, he didn't really make any good points. He didn't come with any actual data or logic. He just spouted off talking points that have been fed to him by mainstream media and people who are influenced by corporations that have an agenda to disseminate, quote, facts to us based on that agenda. What I would encourage people to do, if you're a young person, is do your research, man. There are a lot of great independent journalists out there on the right and the left. I consume a lot of content by people who would be considered classical liberals or even on the left, socialists. Jimmy Dore, I believe, is essentially a socialist by his own definition. I love his content. What matters is authenticity. That's what matters. So do your research. Check out Amala's channel. She does a great job. But this disingenuous effort by our mainstream media outlets, and I'm including Fox in this because Fox, just like all the others, has really shown its true colors lately and what they've done with Tucker Carlson, for example. So they are not objective news sources. And look, you can have editorialized content as long as you make it known that that's what that is. But when you have networks like CNN who parade themselves around as being objective truth tellers, as we saw in the recent presidential town hall, they just kept saying, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true, as though they're the arbiters of truth, when they do actually have a political agenda. And a lot of the topics that came up in that town hall are hotly disputed topics by large portions of our population, then I think that's very disingenuous, and you need to be careful of that. So anyway, that's all I got to say about that, guys. I think this was a great job by Amala at dispelling a lot of the talking points that this kid brought up to her. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, and I will keep putting out content like this. Until next time, guys, I love you. Keep your minds free.